Hey everyone, welcome to the Current Case Podcast. We're a group of four friends discussing the latest current events as they apply to our everyday lives. From foreign policy to local events, we cover it all as best we can in a manner not restrained by the bias of the big media corporations. We may not always agree with each other on certain topics, but that is what makes it all the more interesting. Being able to sit down and have a civil conversation on even the most controversial topics is a necessity for a better society. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Current Case Podcast. This is Season 2, Episode 11. Today is Thursday, March 16th.
And welcome back, Cameron from Florida. How was it?
It was pretty cool. It was fun. It was really hot though. And then we came back here and it's like snowing the day that I came back. So, I don't know. I mean, I was glad to be out of that heat, but at what cost?
Welcome back to Ohio.
Yeah, welcome back. Well, did you have fun at least? What did you do specifically?
I went to Universal Studios.
Yeah.
Pretty much every day.
Strip clubs?
It's cool. No strip clubs.
Okay. You haven't even lived.
No, I didn't even go into the karaoke club or any of the other clubs on Universal City Walk.
Okay. Just ride all the rides?
Yeah, pretty much.
Nice. Good shit. Best ride?
Jurassic World Velocicoaster. I rode that at night, and it was... Like, I've ridden it before, but never at night when it was dark out. That was a next level experience right there.
Yeah, I haven't been there before myself, so I'll have to... I've been there, but I need to go ride that. So that'll be fun. All right, well, let's get right into it then. All right, Ashton, you want to introduce what happened 2 days ago with Russia and the U.S. and the drone that they didn't shoot down, but basically took down intentionally?
Yes. So, 2 days ago on March 14th,
yep.
A U.S. MQ-9 Reaper drone was doing a routine surveillance mission over international waters above the Black Sea when two Russian Su-27 flankers moved in to intercept the drone. They didn't actively shoot at the drone, but they did perform a very unsafe interception. We have footage of at least two very dangerously close passes where they basically flew right mere inches above the drone and dumped fuel on it.
Right.
And in one of these passes, one of the flankers actually caught the Reaper's propeller, which forced it down and crashed into the Black Sea in international waters. And from what I can tell, both flankers inevitably returned back to base. Though, as for the flanker that crashed into the drone, I'm not sure if that's going to be repairable, or at least by Russian standards, or if that's going to end up in a boneyard sometime next week. But either way, the drone is effectively a total loss for the U.S. since it was forced to ditch into the Black Sea. And last I checked, the U.S. is not going to make any effort to recover the drone because it crashed inside the Black Sea, and U.S. ships are prohibited from entering the Black Sea due to the fact that Turkey closed the Bosphorus Straits at the outbreak of this war.
I saw that. Could Turkey technically make the claim and go grab it for us?
As a NATO ally, they can do that.
I don't know why they aren't, because, Russia, they said they're going to be the ones to go get it. I'm going to assume they aren't bringing it back to us, so...
Yeah, I very much doubt it.
They're just going to take that technology. They probably already have. They probably already know a lot about our drones, so would you say it's a big loss?
Not too big a loss. The Reaper's been in service for at least a decade now. It's not a new platform, and I know that U.S. officials said that just before it splashed down, they did wipe all the sensitive data from it.
Okay.
So all that's pretty much going to be left is going to be the husk of a wreck. And as for whether or not Russia might get anything useful off of the design of the aircraft, I honestly don't think so. I think the only thing that would probably be worth Russia's effort would probably be the sensors, like the thermal cameras and whatnot. But that's only just going to be one system, and it's almost certainly going to be heavily damaged by the impact of the water and exposure to the salt water. So it'll probably be rendered useless. Russia pretty much already has some of its own drones that are similar. The two closest ones I could find would be the Orion drone and the Forpost. Though the Forpost is actually a licensed-produced copy of an Israeli searcher drone.
Right.
Did you guys see that Newsweek posted an article saying that fact check, is video of the U.S. drone taken down by Russia jet real?
Oh yeah, I saw.
Playing, is video of U.S. drone taken down by Russia real? Fact check by Newsweek, unverified. Like, the fuck do you need to verify? Like, it's literally caught in 4K. Like, go look at it.
Yeah, literally.
Source?
What do you mean
Source?
unverified? I'm looking right at it. And what I really want to know is, and forgive my ignorance on the topic if the answer is really obvious, but why in God's name are we flying a drone in international waters so close to Russia in the first place? I mean, I get that we're like kind of at odds here, but as far as I know, the U.S. and Russia haven't officially declared war on each other, so it seems like a really boneheaded move, Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. You flew it too close to Russia, and it went down.
Technically speaking, the drone was actually a lot closer to Turkey than it was to Crimea.
Because fuck them, that's why.
Yeah, fuck Russia.
Yeah. They've been flying Tupolev bombers near Alaska.
They do the same shit all the time. Fuck them. And you can't tell me that wasn't intentional by them. I've heard they actually got orders to do it. It's not like this is a rogue pilot or anything. Like, they intentionally dumped fuel on it with the intent to most likely crash it.
I love how the State Department was like, yeah, so these two amateur Russian pilots who clearly were unable to control their aircraft crashed into an MQ-9 Reaper drone. They're like, they didn't call it an attack or anything like that. They instead said, yeah, these pilots were so amateurish that they essentially crashed themselves into it. It's hilarious.
They're just trying to avoid, like, as long as they can, the big escalation.
Yeah, and besides, the U.S. Air Force kind of has a policy of not retaliating if one of their unmanned systems gets attacked because nobody's really put at risk.
But what about the drone operator? What about him?
I think they were piloting that drone all the way from Italy.
Sounds about right.
And he lost his connection. He has to hook his Xbox controller up to a different drone now.
Yeah.
Poor guy.
Maybe it was really attached to that drone. Maybe it was his. How'd you like it if Russia shot down one of your RC airplanes?
Oh, my drone got shot down.
Oh no, I guess we have to go to Hobby Lobby and buy a new one.
Yeah.
Oh no, I need more styrofoam.
I see this as kind of a test by Russia. Again, kind of noticing patterns here this past season of how much like China and Russia just want to keep pushing us. Because they know we're not going to escalate over a drone, which, I get. There's no reason to really, not going to declare war over an unmanned drone. At the same time, you should be like, we want retribution for that drone. We want it back.
Or at least compensation.
Yeah, compensation for that drone. We want it back, or you owe us what it was worth, which, Russia probably wouldn't pay it anyways, but...
Yeah, they probably couldn't afford to pay it even if they wanted to.
Probably. But I was hoping a little more tougher stance with what happened there than what we got, because, Russia's going to be like, oh, they aren't doing shit about it. Why don't we try the same shit with the other drones they fly near the border? What's stopping them? It's like the Chinese spy balloon. They're not doing shit about the Chinese spy balloon. They could have shot it down earlier, so why don't we just send more off or do other shit to mess with them?
That kind of illustrates, that kind of gives me the impression that they might try and do it again, but this time with probably a more high-value drone, such as the RQ-4A Global Hawk drones, which I know have been kind of circling around Ukraine and the battle space there.
Right.
And they're not... Officially, the U.S. is not supplying intel to Ukraine, but I think it's pretty much an open secret that we've been providing the Ukrainians with Russian troop locations.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I saw today that Poland's sending in, what kind of jets were they?
MiG-29 Fulcrums.
Okay. So you think that's going to be open season for the other NATO countries to start sending in their own jets?
It's a start.
As long as it's not us.
I kind of see this as an excuse to start sending in jets ourselves. Like, all right, fuck off. You just shot one of our drones down. Why don't we send in some jets? We'll give you something to shoot down Russia.
Yeah. Poland, honestly, is probably one of the biggest supporters of Ukraine in its war in several key areas. The fact that it sounds like I think they actually tried to do the same thing, supply Ukraine their force of MiG-29s last year, but that plan initially got shot down. No pun intended.
Technically crashed into whatever the fuck they did. Pouring gas on it. I don't think they meant to hit it intentionally, but definitely pouring gas part to bring it down was their original plan, at least what I saw from that video. And then they're like, oh fuck, we hit it, and that brought it down anyways. Sorry, what were you saying, Ashton?
But yeah, Poland certainly has been critical to keeping Ukraine up and run in the fight. And I think Poland is definitely leading by example by providing some more jets to replace some of Ukraine's fleet. Mm-hmm. Granted, Ukraine already had MiG-29s even at the start of this, though I know Ukraine's actually been at a bit of a disadvantage throughout this war in the air domain, seeing their fulcrums and flankers are a generation behind that of what Russia has.
Right.
And though we have actually been providing Ukraine with some Western-made ordnance to start using on those jets, most notably the HARM, anti-radar missile, and most recently they actually started receiving JDAMs for use on their aircraft.
Well, if the jets do come in, do you just see Russia enacting? I remember that cycle you were talking about, I think in an earlier episode when we started sending in the tanks. Do you think they'll just do the same cycle again, or will they think you'll do something even more extreme?
It's probably going to be the same cycle over again.
That's what I'm thinking too. But overall, I mean, do you think we reacted the right way to what happened with the drone?
As far as not escalating the situation more than it needed to, yes. But as far as maybe trying to make it so maybe we warn Russia not to do this again, we probably could have done better there.
I agree.
Oh no, Russia, please don't piss on our jets anymore. Don't dump fuel on us.
Please stop dumping fuel on our drones. It's your feelings.
It's also
Drones are people too.
Drones lies.
I identify as an MQ-1 Reaper.
MQ-1 would be the Predator, MQ-9 is the Reaper.
Wrong identification.
Yeah. Anyways, it's also kind of ironic how in the past decade we'd always hear on the news about how drone strikes. Now we have a news article about someone else striking the drone.
Shit. Damn.
Oh, the turntables.
Oh, fuck. That's a good point there, Ashton. I didn't even think about that.
What's the drone doing? Not how the drone doing.
What's that drone doing? Is it fair to say I can't believe no one's even said it yet, but we're in a new Cold War. No way. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. I'm officially calling it new Cold War.
Yeah.
Didn't you say that like 3 episodes ago?
I'm still saying it again.
Yeah, it helps to get the point across.
Yeah. Fuck them politicians trying to avoid that term. It's a new Cold War, bitch. Get used to it.
Yeah.
China's
already
trigger happy. They're like,
fuck them.
bitch, change course. We're gonna have war. We're gonna have war. We're gonna have war. We're gonna have war. It's like they're getting hyped for this shit.
Fuck them.
It's also kind of an interesting juxtaposition when you compare sort of the intercepts that happened back during the late Cold War to the intercepts that are happening now. Because I remember hearing from this YouTuber by the name of Ward Carroll, he would often make, I think on one of his episodes, when he was discussing a dangerously close interception of a Chinese aircraft performed against a U.S. reconnaissance aircraft, he would compare it back to the days when he was in the U.S. Navy back in the Cold War, and he would actually go up and intercept some Soviet aircraft that were flying close to the carrier fleets. And the intercepts back then were actually quite lighthearted. Everyone would they would keep their distance, and sometimes he would even have these little instances of banter between himself and the Soviet pilots. I don't remember exactly how he worded it, but I think one instance when they're at a low enough altitude to not need the oxygen masks, they would basically put on these Reagan masks. They would hold up Playboys, and that's
all I'm saying is that if China wants to fuck around and find out, they will meet a very similar fate as Japan did in World War II.
Indeed.
And they'll understand why you don't poke the sleeping bear.
Bear would be Russia.
But the sleeping eagle?
Sleeping tiger was, I think, Yamamoto allegedly. But anyways, compare
Well, if Russia's a bear, I think it's like 3 days from death.
Yeah.
It's like sickly looking.
Nah, it's just like
the cocaine bear?
Cocaine bear.
Either that, or it's just someone in the skin of a bear trying to look scary.
No, that's definitely China.
It's a guy in a bear suit.
On cocaine, too.
Russia are furries, confirmed.
I've heard there's been more cocaine cases this year compared to any other so far. There's cocaine everywhere, apparently.
Oh yeah, you know all about that, don't you, Jared?
Of course, I got my stash. No, just kidding, I don't. That's a joke.
Sure, that's what they all say.
Let's cut this out.
But anyways, kind of like what I was trying to get at earlier. Compare what those intercepts back in the Cold War were like to what it's happening now. You've got both Russian and Chinese pilots doing these very dangerous, awfully dangerously close intercepts where they're barely inches apart from the aircraft they're trying to intercept.
Did they get a great Polaroid of it too? Communicating?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there have been some instances of that. But I remember seeing this one Russian intercept of a Russian flanker going in front of a B-52. He wagged his wings and then pulled right in front of the bomber, throwing it into its jet wash. Then you also have that incident in 2001 where a Chinese aircraft rammed and brought down a US EP-3, which caused an international incident between us and China back then.
Right.
Interesting juxtaposition, I thought I'd point out.
That is pretty interesting. Anybody else have something to add on here?
I think Russia sucks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Русские аэропланы, иди нахуй.
All right, well, let's move on then. and talk about how my bank fucking crashed Silicon Valley. You know how much money I had in that bank?
You didn't bank in Silicon Valley.
$600,000 lost.
He'll give
Fucking
it all
believe
back.
this? Bullshit. So Matthew, you want to explain what happened? The past couple of days, there's actually been another bank as well that's been bailed out. But there's been a lot of bank drama this past 2 weeks, starting with Silicon Valley that completely crashed on March 10th, and now it's begging for a bailing.
Yeah, so much has happened since last Friday.
Yeah,
Let me pull up my notes here.
Cameron's got all the time to edit. Don't worry.
I think banks suck.
All right, to start at the highest possible level here. On Friday, SVB, Silicon Valley Bank, announced that it was having...
Could you shut the fuck
Who
up? I'm
interrupts
trying to fucking record a show here.
All right, go ahead.
So on March 10th, Silicon Valley Bank, one of the prominent leaders in the startup area, lapsed. So March 8th, Silvergate Capital, which is a cryptocurrency-focused bank, announced that it would cease operations and liquidate its assets after a bank run forced the California lender to sell a chunk of its debt securities. Silicon Valley Bank concerned investors when it said that it needed to shore up its balance sheet and raise $2 billion in capital. It was forced to sell a bond portfolio at a $1.8 billion loss. And this is important, and I'll get into this a little bit later. In a letter to customers, Greg Becker, the chief executive at Silicon Valley Bank, said the bank enjoyed the financial position to weather sustained market pressures, but he noted that customer deposits had come in lower than forecast in February. Moody's, a credit rating firm, downgraded the bank's bond rating and slashed its outlook to negative from stable. Moving on to the following day, on March 9th, Mr. Becker urged VC firms to stay calm, and that Bill Ackman, the billionaire investor, suggested that Silicon Valley Bank could fail and needed a bailout. In a note sent to clients, a executive wrote that the bank was actually quite sound, and it's disappointing to see so many smart investors tweet otherwise.
Nothing to see here. Please disperse.
Too big to fail.
Yep, and then a few hours later, Silicon Valley's bank announcement prompted another wave of customer withdrawals, and the stock plummeted 60%. So, March 10th, this all kind of went down. Silicon Valley Bank failed after a run on deposit. Everyone know what a bank run is?
Yo.
Everybody tries to withdraw their money as soon as possible.
Yes. And the problem with that is if you strip a company of all of its assets at once,
It becomes worthless.
correct.
Exactly.
So, Silicon Valley Bank was the nation's 16th largest bank, and the FDIC was named the receiver. So once they failed, the FDIC effectively took over said bank. Because the 40-year-old institution became the largest bank to crash since the 2008 financial crisis, it put nearly $175 billion in customer deposits under the regulator's control. Now, for everyone out there, it's not just one bank in this sense. Almost every bank borrows and lends to every other bank in our commercial finance system. So the shock from Silicon Valley's sudden financial collapse reverberated through parts of the banking sector, and investors started to dump bank stocks, including those of First Republic, Signature Bank, Western Alliance, and many others. Later that day, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen reassured investors that the banking system was resilient.
Too big to fail.
Yeah. And Signature Bank saw a torrent of deposits leaving its branches. So once again, there was another run on Signature Bank, and that is what kind of kicked this all off. Because yeah, you can have the 16th largest bank kind of fail, and while it sucks, it's probably a fluke. But once you start getting into that domino effect of bank failure, bank failure, bank failure, that's when it's more indicative of a system-wide issue.
Mm-hmm.
So 2 banks ended up failing, both SVB and Signature Bank.
When did
Yeah.
Signature Bank fail?
I think the day after.
March 11th?
Yeah,
Okay.
because they announced SVB was essentially bankrupt.
Right.
Friday before the market closed.
Yeah.
So that sent shockwaves. Pre-market trading Monday, huge drop from almost all bank stocks. And then Signature Bank, which had a large holding in SVB, I guess also went under.
All the bank stocks recovered.
So here's the thing. For all of us, our money in the bank is federally insured by the FDIC, right? We have a $250,000 deposit threshold. Anything up to that point, federal government will say, all right, your bank failed. Here's a check for your money. And the reason why we have that insurance is to prevent bank run. Because if you look back to the 1920s during the Great Depression, the reason why it got so bad is because everyone went and withdrew all their money at once because there was no government insurance for programs like these.
Yep.
If your bank went bust, you're shit out of luck.
Exactly.
Yeah. So interestingly enough, after the FDIC took over SVB, they announced that not only would they pay the $250,000 to the depositors, they would cover all of the depositors' money. Now keep in mind, there are a ton of startup companies that use Silicon Valley Bank to hold their assets, to make loans from, etc. And if the FDIC hadn't bailed them out fully, you would see issues not only in the banking sector, but in the whole startup area of Silicon Valley, Palo Alto, really everything in the startup world, which would have had even more potential economic impact. So again, the government decided just to say, fuck it, everyone who had money in here, you get it back, let's try and not make this a domino effect.
Minimize the damage.
Well, did you guys see that, like, shortly after this, Joe Biden, Sleepy Joe, gave a speech, and he very clearly said that this is how capitalism works. If you make a bad investment, then it sucks for you, you lose. And then he turned right around and said, oh, by the way, we're also going to go ahead and bail out these investors that made a bad investment. So it's kind of flip-floppy, a bit hypocritical there, don't you think?
Capitalism for us peasants, socialism for the wealthy. That's how it
Something
works.
like that.
I guess I'll bring up a point I was going to make a little bit earlier. It seems like, especially with SVB and everything else, there are two kinds of banks. There are the banks that, yeah, that sucks, whatever. And then there's a second tier of banks that, oh, they're too big to fail. We can't let them fail. What happens if they fail? Bail out, bail out, bail out. And it's a really weird position because you don't know which banks are too big to fail and which ones, oh yeah, that sucks, you got burned, whatever. Another point that a lot of people are making is, will this be the new standard if a bank goes under? Are they going to go over that $250,000 that's promised and continue to give shareholders their full amount? Because that's setting kind of a dangerous precedent that, the federal government can just be like an overprotective parent whenever their kid fucks up. It's like, you got to deal with my dad. Just,
Money machine never stop.
Exactly.
I say let it go burr. Nothing wrong with that, besides that crippling inflation that comes with it.
So not only did two of our banks go down, then there were reports that Credit Suisse Credit Suisse, which is a Swiss bank, is down almost 80% because of various reasons, mostly due to deposits and certain liabilities within their company being due. But, the Swiss, they're known for their banks. That's what the Swiss do, is we are the banking country.
Right.
Now you go over there, you open a cool Swiss bank account and you keep money over there and whatnot. The fact that they're struggling is indicative of something quite large in the world economy, in my opinion.
What do you suspect that might be?
It's too early to tell. I have no idea.
Switzerland is, I call them credit sussy because I think it's more funny.
Baka.
But Switzerland was more than eager to bail out Credit Suisse, so they got bailed out, I think today, and their stocks, of course, went way the back up. So there we go. Money machine. Love it.
I've also heard some reports that Barclays Bank in the United Kingdom is experiencing some sort of difficulty, although information on that is limited at this point. But, most journalists haven't really reported on how connected a lot of these things are. They're just like, oh yeah, bank went bust, and that's it. So how do commercial banks make money? Does anyone here know?
Don't they give out loans with interest and finance some projects where they get some interest back?
That's part of it. How else would they make money?
I was going to say interest on loans.
Yeah, loans are another part, but what else do they do?
Go ahead. Explain.
Cameron, any ideas?
Nope.
All right. So yes, well, they make different types of loans to individuals. They take whatever money you deposit into their bank, and they use that to buy assets of various sorts. So they use treasury bonds, U.S. bonds,
Stocks,
Bonds, yeah.
all sorts of different financial assets. And in the case of SVB, their asset of choice, per se, were commercial bonds. So the increased interest rate that we've seen from the Fed for the past 6 months, that has a direct effect on the federal fund rate. Do you guys know what that is?
Go ahead. Explain.
The federal fund rate is the rate at which banks lend from the federal government. So they say, hey, you can borrow money from us, they'll say 5%, whatever it is. They have the power to do so. So when they're messing with this rate, the yield to maturity for bonds increases. Now, with all that's happened recently, we assume that private sector bonds have really decreased in value because of those increased interest rate hikes. So now they have $2 billion of bonds that were in their asset side of their balance sheet, but just like that, turned into liabilities almost overnight. And that's unrecoverable. You can't just have $2 billion turn into essentially $4 billion liability. It's not going to go well. The other fact that is interesting in regards to SVB is that commercial banks have to join the FDIC insurance program. Now, to do this, it's like a membership and you have to pay a premium each month.
Yep.
So, it is also a requirement for commercial banks to be a member of the FDIC. It's per federal law. SVB violated this law. It is said that only about 10% of deposits were actually insured by the FDIC.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've heard they're under investigation. At least that's what the federal government said.
Yeah, so I'll get to that here in a minute too. But think about it, really only 10% of a bank is federally insured?
That's a red flag.
Yeah, and fortunately the FDIC paid the full amount, even though they shouldn't have to, but I think it was the right thing for them to end up doing. Yeah, but another interesting fact is a lot of politicians use that bank.
Yeah.
So, little hint there. Now, the one thing I want to say, specifically against former President Trump, is that he did repeal quite a few banking regulations that I suspect did play a role in this. And
I thought those repeals of the regulations were also a bipartisan thing as well.
probably were, but don't repeal safeguards to America's financial system. That's how you get something like 2008, well, 2007 through 2009, 2010.
10 is when it officially ended.
Well, some economists argue it was closer to 2013 when we fully recovered from that, but alas. So where do we kind of stand on this? An optimistic view would be to say that this isn't quite over, but it was just, think of it as like a financial glitch per se. And once all the banks kind of change their money around, everything should turn out all right. However, if these banks are significantly more invested in each other, and we get more of that domino effect, we are posed for a financial crisis much more intense than the one in 2007, 2008. And that's the scary part, is we don't know how involved these banks are, and until we know how involved they are, we really don't know what the probability is that it turns into something serious.
So what are you looking for as warning signs right now?
Well, number one, I want to say don't go to your bank and start pulling out money. That is not going to help the situation whatsoever. If we've seen anything thus far, the FDIC has more than stepped in to ensure personal deposits. So leave your money in the bank, let it be. It'll be all right. But repeat your question, Jared.
Any warning signs we should look out for that are good
So
towards that?
I would also keep an eye on just the stock prices and the earnings reports of a lot of these larger banks, specifically Chase. Chase Bank, well, JP Morgan Chase is the number one commercial bank in the United States.
Yep.
I suspect that they probably had a sizable portion in SVB. Now, since the FDIC has taken in, like I've said time and time again, this might not be a huge deal, so a lot of these banks will probably be able to wait it out and kind of float it from other areas. But that's the big issue, is how long can these banks kind of float and wait on their money to be given back to them.
Do you know who Jim Cramer is?
Yes. Do whatever. Do exactly the opposite of whatever Jim Cramer tells you to do.
He said J.P. Morgan was a fortress. We're fucked.
He's not wrong.
Inverse, we're fucked.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. Just 2 weeks ago, he was saying, you need to buy SVB stock. That's the best thing ever. But when he says JP Morgan Chase has been regarded as a fortress, per se, because it is a...
Too big to fail.
Yes, and it is the largest bank in the U.S. But always inverse Kramer. So if he's saying good things about Chase, we are...
I'll see you guys in the Biden bills, we'll call them.
Great Depression Part 2.
We'll record our podcast on that. Oh, I won't have this anymore. I'll get a little tablet, I guess.
We'll build a megaphone out of cardboard and just shout. You guys can come over and listen.
There you go. That's perfect. You guys
as long as you guys bring some bread for us, we'll be happy.
You guys, could you not disturb our tent? We're trying to record a podcast in here, please.
We have to walk 5 miles to the public square, though. We don't have cars.
Yeah.
True.
Walk there, and people will be able to listen to us through our cardboard megaphone.
But did you guys also see that, prior to this, SVB was hailed as like, ooh, what a diverse and wonderful bank. Like, all of our shareholders are women, or like their board members and everything else. It's like, oh, look at us. We're like the pinnacle of, like, oh yeah, we're fine. Everything's fine. Everything's good. They didn't even have a risk officer at their bank. It's like, how can you operate a bank without a chief risk officer?
You can't make it up, dude. You can't make this shit up.
No, you can't.
It sounds like they need to reconsider their priorities.
Yeah, so let's make our board entirely women and not have a risk officer and see how this fucking plays out.
This is awesome. Look at how diverse it is. Oh my god. Who the hell cares?
I think this goes to show, like, as controversial as this may be, just because something is more diverse does not mean it is safer or better.
Right.
'Cause I don't know about you. I would personally rather have safe, secure money in something versus my money in something that is not safe and very risky.
Exactly. So, one last question I got, because I'm a little behind on this update, because I know when that happened, the federal government's like, we are not going to bail out this bank. You said it earlier. Have they changed their stance at all on that? Are they bailing? Because I've heard mixed things, like what they're actually doing with this bank. Are they working to bail out these banks?
Well, ideally, you have other banks buy it out. So remember back in like the 2008 financial crisis, you had banks like Lehman Brothers went under, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, a lot of those things, AIG.
Yeah.
A lot of those companies were purchased by other banks. And so I think Chase bought Lehman Brothers, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
Someone bought Lehman Brothers. And what they do is, let's say the bank has $1 million in liability, to make this really simple math. One bank will come in and say, all right, we'll buy your $1 million in liabilities for $900,000. And then the next bank will be like, all right, well, I'll buy your $1 million in liabilities at $850,000. It starts a bidding war.
Interesting how the bidding gets lower and lower as opposed to how it usually goes.
But if it gets too low and no one buys it, that's when things go seriously wrong. So I think SVB was bought for 60 cents on the dollar, which all things considered isn't terrible.
Mm-hmm.
But the worrisome thing is how stable are all these other banks. And of course you have all these spokespeople being like, our financial system is the strongest it's ever been. Blah, 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 blah. Like, your money is incredibly safe. Well, yeah, that's what SVB said 2 days before it catastrophically collapsed also.
Mm-hmm.
Reminds me of a quote from Grand Admiral Thrawn from the Star Wars. His universe, where he said something to the effect of, those who place too much faith in fortresses will inevitably find that faith, for lack of a better word, destroyed upon that very same fortress which they thought would protect them.
I'm going to answer my own question here. It sounds like they essentially said that anyone who made above that $250,000 threshold sounds like they're getting bailed out. But the Fed said it's not no taxpayer money will be used. But it's like I might be an idiot, but I'm not that much of an idiot. They're going to use our taxpayer money.
Well, technically, no, they won't. So the way this would work is the Federal Reserve System would just increase the money supply, which doesn't come from anywhere. It's essentially the money printer. Yeah, it just, all of a sudden you see digital money in these huge banks in their accounts. So, do you guys know how the Federal Reserve System works?
Not exactly.
All right, so it's made up of 5 different entities right now. You have the Board of Governors, that's 7 members, including the chairman, appointed by the President of the United States, confirmed by the Senate. You have the Federal Open Market Committee, the FOMC, 7 members of the Board of Governors, plus presidents of FRB of New York and 4 other FRBs. Then you have 12 Federal Reserve banks, each with 9 directors who appoint president of other officers of the FRB. You have the Federal Advisory Council, which are 12 bankers, 1 from each district. And then you have member banks, which are around 2,500 different commercial banks. So what the Federal Reserve can do is they have 3 primary policy tools. They have the power to change the reserve requirements. They have the power for open market operations, and they also have the power to change the discount rate. So, discount rate is federal lending to banks. Open market operations is the federal fund rate, which we talked about earlier, the overnight lending in between banks. And then the reserve requirements is the ratio of how much money banks have to hold versus how much they can loan out. So, banks hold a certain amount of reserves that is greater than the required reserves, right? So that additional amount is called excess reserves. And in addition, the general public may want to hold currency rather than making deposits. And I just scrapped that part, trying to make this simple. So essentially, the Fed controls the amount of monetary base, which will have a multiplier effect on the total quantity of money measured by M1. M1 money is the sum of checkable deposits and currency in circulation. So you can estimate M1 a couple different ways. Usually the currency ratio, how much currency the public wants to hold relative to their deposits. So IKC would equal C over D. So you get something, if you go through and do all the math, that M1 equals 1 plus C over C plus R plus E times MB. And that's how you calculate the money multiplier. Now this is getting really into some
your economics textbook right here.
Yeah, but
basically,
following the financial crisis in 2008, the Federal Reserve began injecting the banking system with massive amounts of liquidity, and at the same time, very little lending occurred. As a result, the M1 money multiplier fell below 1 for most of the time before October 2008 through 2011. And that is what we are trying to avoid, is we want to have the M1 money multiplier stay above 1. I know that's a little bit in the weeds, but if we can keep M1 above 1, we should be fine. The problem is that's going to be hard if the Federal Reserve is just
printing money.
Just sending money into these banks.
And plus we're already in hot shit from the COVID money printer, so it's you're just adding more fuel to the fire.
So this very likely will once again increase inflation, meaning more rate hikes. We're just going to fuck over corporate bonds even more. Now we're just going to start getting in this vicious cycle, and God knows where it'll take us.
Soft landing, boys. Soft
landing my ass.
They revised the official CPI chart every month, by the way. That increase it. It comes out a little lower than a couple months later. Revise it. It went out. It was actually higher than we reported originally. So I bet this February one was about as equal, or I think it was their expected amount, 6.0%. So we'll see. I bet it's going to be higher than that. That's just my guess, though. All right. So, we're going to have to watch this, kind of look out, see what's going to happen with, I think we're in a pretty unstable condition at the moment, but that's just me.
I don't think that's just you. I think that's anyone with a brain.
Yeah, very true.
The only silver lining is rich people don't like losing their money. So when this starts to affect them and their precious little Swiss bank, stuff's going to get done.
Yeah.
Or at least that's the hope.
The government's going to give it to them. Socialism. Fuck them.
Well, I guess I'll see you all when the next Great Depression hits.
We'll share the bread, split it in half. All right, well, we'll move on from there. This will be a shorter little segments here. Did just kind of want to update with what happened today in France. I know, one of the first episodes we did in season 2, we were talking about the retirement age and how it was.
Before we move into France, the other thing I wanted to talk about in relation to the 2008 crash. Do you guys remember TARP and ARP from 2007, 2008? TARP and AARP? Not the senior bullshit, but the Troubled Asset Resolution Program.
You go ahead and read it out.
So there were 2 programs at the end of 2008 trying to restore the economy. The Troubled Asset Resolution Program that they tried ended up really decreasing the stock price. And so then they tried the AARP program, which is the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. They injected $790 billion into the economy to get it working again. Now, the Federal Reserve, back during that crisis, it's estimated that they dropped 15 times our annual GDP into our money circulation. Now, that's roughly $25 trillion times 15.
No way.
Yes, way.
This can't be real.
It's too big to
That
fail.
Yeah. So they effectively said, all right, let's go ahead and just print off $375 trillion with a T, and just be like, all right, that should solve some things.
Why
And
can't
they
I-
wonder why we have inflation.
Why can't I just do that when I'm having financial troubles?
I love
Yeah.
that.
I'm just gonna print
Money
out some
printer
extra
go
money.
burr.
Why did you hear how much they spent during COVID?
Yeah. So guess what happens when they just print $375 trillion? Take a guess. Anyone?
Inflation out the wazoo.
Well, yeah, they called it, oh, we're going to do some quantitative easing, but it had significant effects on long-term bonds that triggered a massive bond buy, which absolutely decimated the yield to maturity on them. So wrecked the bond market, wrecked the stock market up, and made money more expensive in the process, which was great.
Oh, God. It's got a pop-up for Jim Cramer's 2023 investing outlook. Oh, fuck.
That's great. Do the exact opposite. Inverse Kramer 23. Let's go.
All right, last thing here. We'll make it quick. But I did just want to mention this here. Last couple minutes. Today, I know earlier in the season we were talking about France's retirement age and how it was proposed it was going to get raised from 62 to 64. So just today, the French Parliament, they did not approve of the bill to actually raise the age. But Macron was like, nah, fuck you guys. He resorted to Article 49.3, which essentially gives him the power to push that bill through. And now it is now legislation for the French government. So the official retirement age has now been raised from 62 to 64.
Goodness gracious. Doesn't sound like Macron's getting reelected next time.
Oh, God, that guy. I mean, I remember I was paying attention to that. It was like 21 or 22. No, 22 was his election against... 22 was his election against Le Pen. I mean, she was basically a Russian puppet. So that's the only reason why he won. But I remember before the war started, he was like, oh, I just made a deal with Putin. I talked to Putin directly, and I made a deal with him, and he said he's not going to invade Ukraine.
And
of
he
course, a
received
week
a
later,
invade.
he was like he's like Neville Chamberlain over here.
Or Donald Trump.
Or Trump. But I don't know. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see what's going to happen in France here. The people aren't too happy about this. Might see some guillotines in the future.
Viva la revolution.
Fuck the French government.
I think the French government sucks.
Or at least Macron, since Parliament tried to stop it.
Yeah, but that guy was like, nah, we're pushing. Next week is the season finale. So we'll try to have a guest star on. Either it's going to be my brother or Melvin, which we've had on before. So should be a very exciting episode, hopefully. And we'll see you guys next week. Cameron forgot to say, remember to leave a like and subscribe at the beginning. I'm a fucking idiot, so I'll have to say it now. Please leave a like and subscribe. And we will see you in the next episode.